and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli, and I'm reporting at 9:11 p.m. 9:11 p.m. from a very dark, bleak Central European city of Budapest, made all the darker and all the bleaker by having spent a grueling hour in the dentist's office this afternoon, um, which adds to the atmosphere of gloom and pessimism that has always been Budapest, but it seems to be that and more to me anyway. Um, so that's the report from here. I'm very glad, however, for everyone who has joined me for this Tuesday live stream. And obviously, there's a great deal to talk about. And the obviously the main item, um, in terms of domestic affairs, is the signals conversation and Jeffrey Goldberg. And in terms of foreign affairs, this agreement that apparently has been reached in Riyadh between the United States and Russia and Ukraine for the a Black Sea, I don't know, ceasefire, should we say. But first, let's talk about the United States. I am I have to say that I'm very baffled by that the whole sequence of events with Jeffrey Goldberg. Jeffrey Goldberg, who exposes this conversation, the signal conversation involving the Trump administration principles to which he was invited. Now, this is very strange. Well, first of all, it's quite strange for a journalist to be invited into a conversation of principles. In other words, it's a conversation by decision makers in which they presumably will discuss decisions that they intend to take. And so, why would they want to have a journalist present there? But having allowed a journalist to be present there, why of all people would they select Jeffrey Goldberg? Now, Jeffrey Goldberg, we don't need to go through his sordid history. The man who more than anyone else, more than any other journalist, more than any other political figure in the United States, facilitated the 2003 invasion. Those articles that he wrote in the New Yorker, in which he made clear that Saddam Hussein was in alliance with Al Qaeda. Saddam Hussein was therefore in some ways involved in the 9/11 attack, in which clearly suggested that Saddam Hussein was on the brink of having nuclear weapons. He was he was very much a part of that. S.E. Dillendam says even George is baffled. That's some serious murk in this. I think so. I think so. So first of all, it's strange to invite a journalist into this discussion of the principles, but then inviting Jeffrey Goldberg. Now, Jeffrey Goldberg's hostility and animus towards Donald Trump is longstanding and very well known. I mean, he did a lot of damage to Trump coming into the 2020 election with his story about how Trump had supposedly referred to dead U.S. servicemen as suckers and losers during his visit to France in 2018 to commemorate the centenary of the armistice and World War One, and so that damaged Trump. No, there's no question, because even though Trump denied it, and even though the people around Trump all said, "Well, we never heard him saying that," but nonetheless, it was out there. The media, of course, gave it a great deal of coverage, and so it did damage Trump. And then, of course, in the 2024 election, and we covered this quite extensively here at the Gaggle, he wrote a series of articles um, claiming that Trump had expressed admiration for Hitler. And he quoted generals. He quoted General John Kelly. He quoted what was he, Milley? Milley. They somehow Trump was a big fan of Hitler's. Now, again, there was really no evidence for this, and it was always very unlikely, because if Trump had been an admirer of Hitler's, we would have heard about it. We'd have heard about it long ago. I mean, Trump has been in the public eye since the 1970s, and anything as stark as admiration for Hitler would have absolutely been seen the light of day. And there had, after all, been also a number of biographies that have been written about Trump over the years, and none of the biographers had ever discussed Trump's supposed admiration for Hitler. So it was unlikely, but it got a lot of publicity, because Goldberg has stature. However disgusting he is, he without question has stature as a journalist. He was was a big writer at the New Yorker, and then he's the editor in chief of the Atlantic, which is the railhead of anti-Trump journalism. It's bankrolled by Steve Jobs' widow. She got all this money. That's a nice gig. You marry a rich guy, and then he dies off nice and early, so you're still young, and then you get to enjoy lots of money for the rest of your life. So she's made this her project, and so it's very well funded, and it's full of writers such as the disgusting, loathsome David Frum, and so that's it. So again, given all the damage that Jeffrey Goldberg had inflicted on Trump, why would he alone, he of all the possible journalists, be invited onto this group chat? Now, common sense would suggest, well, this was a deliberate job. I mean, they didn't invite on, Maggie Haberman of the New York Times, or Peter Baker of the New York Times. So who I think at least would be, I mean, they're obviously anti-Trump, but they would at least have there be a certain logic to inviting them. They're the New York Times. But then you have Jeffrey Goldberg. Now, so what does Goldberg do? Goldberg it takes part in these conversations. Again, first of all, we've got to remember that everyone is accepting Goldberg's account of the events. And Goldberg's a liar. He's a stone cold liar. So therefore, there's absolutely no reason to accept his account of what happened. So therefore, when he says, "Well, I was invited on by somebody who claimed that he was Mike Waltz," that may or may not be true, but there's no reason to believe it just because Waltz says so. So he gets invited on, and the most important thing that he claims is that Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, disclosed very detailed military operations on this signal chat. And so now Goldberg, of course, doesn't reproduce Hegseth's messages in which he's outlining details of America's impending attack. I mean, that's what she said. Oh, this is America's impending attack. This is highly classified, and there it was. But we only have Goldberg's claim for that, because he does the patriotic thing. He said, well, of course, I wouldn't republish Hegseth's detailed military report. So that part is obviously sticks out to me, and say, okay, well, all the talk about this, there was some highly classified material that was being shared by an outsider, a complete outsider, and not just a complete outsider, but somebody who was very hostile to Trump. We only have Goldberg's claim for that. And again, this is a person who is determined to do as much damage as he can to Trump. Now, his claim is that he was invited on by Waltz. This is obviously damaging to Waltz, and so far it seems like Trump is sticking by him. There was a news conference today, and Trump, very ostentatiously was supporting Waltz. That could change, but at the moment, Trump is sticking by Waltz, and so then you have to think, well, maybe somebody else brought Goldberg onto that signal chat, and I don't know that. I don't know that. Again, we only have Goldberg's claims for all of these things, and it could well be that there are other figures somewhere, whether working for Waltz, working for Hegseth, working in the State Department, who are trying to sabotage Trump as much as possible. I mean, it could quite well be the case, as we found during Trump's first term, that embedded within the National Security Council were creatures like Alexander Vindman, Eric Ciaramella, Fiona Hill. All of them saw their task as to doing as much damage as possible to Trump. And we, given the stakes, given we know what we know about Russia and Ukraine, so leave aside when it comes to Israel and the Houthis and Hamas and all the rest, where there's a consensus, there's a bipartisan consensus. Bipartisan consensus, nothing there that separates the two sides. Clearly, however, when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, there are real differences between Trump and the foreign policy establishment. So there is very much difference between Trump and Goldberg. Now, so Goldberg says, I can't remember the exact date when he was supposedly Essie Delendam says Fiona Hill, she's a fun creature. Yeah, she's a fun creature. Strangely, somebody said some time ago that she looks like Laurence Olivier playing Richard III, and if you look at the shots of Laurence Olivier with playing Richard III with that strange kind of page boy haircut, that I mean that well, at least that when Fiona Hill had that haircut, they looked a little like. But anyway, so Goldberg hangs around in this chat for some time. We don't quite know why he was hanging around. Goldberg doesn't explain why he continued hanging around in this chat. Um, from his account, he made no attempt to find out why he had been invited, and could this have been a mistake, or why that he was included. He didn't drop out from the from the chat. He didn't take part in the chat. So, but this continued, and then on the March the 15th, he alleges that somehow Hexeth discloses this impending attack something like 2 hours before the attack on the Houthis took place. And then it takes place, and then of course he drops out from it. He doesn't explain why exactly he decided at that stage to drop out. Why didn't he stay on? I mean, in other words, if up until then he hadn't dropped out, why would he drop out now? And why didn't he notify anybody there, or that maybe there was some sort of a glitch in the system, and that he shouldn't have been invited to join this this chat room. But nonetheless, he says he dropped out. That was on the so that's the 15th, and then on the 25th. So this is 20. So 20. Today's the 25th. So the 24th. And then the 24th, he then drops this article in the Atlantic. So he waited more than a week before he drops this article. And he drops the article essentially the day before this meeting before the Senate with Trump's top intelligence people, which is John Ratcliffe, Tulsi Gabbard, and Kash Patel. So in other words, it gave a grist to the mill for the Democrats. The Democrats now had something to talk about. This briefing that took place today had been scheduled a long time ago, and Goldberg knew perfectly well about this this briefing, because it was about the threat assessment. Nothing interesting. It's the usual. Russia's a big threat. China's a big threat. North Korea's a big threat. Iran's a big threat. The usual stuff. But they didn't. The Democrats, obviously, they had no intention of talking about the big threats. They only wanted to talk about this. And of course, they wanted to make this into the horrific scandal of a lifetime perpetrated by the Trump people. And of course, the Democrats accepted all of the claims that had been made by Goldberg. So the talk that Hexeth disclosed the all sorts of classified information, and disclosed detailed military plans on this chat site. That all comes from Goldberg, and the Democrats are obviously just simply accepting at face value that that Hexeth did indeed do that. Now, we will never know this, because, of course, because Goldberg didn't publish these military details. It's very unlikely anyone's ever going to publish the military details. The Democrats aren't going to be very much insistent on publishing it. So therefore, it's just going to be out there that Hexeth did this, and then just boom on this public communications app had revealed all kinds of detailed military secrets. But this was Goldberg, and this was Goldberg's plan to damage Trump. Now, at this stage, we really don't know how much damage this will do, because really, the operation is over. At least that part of it, the attack on the Houthis, the attack on the Houthis, by and large, enjoys bipartisan support, and no one's really questioning that. Um, so the only issue would be, well, how, this sloppiness with classified information, um, and I mean the Democrats could certainly, when they see an opportunity here, and obviously they're going to try and run with it and see what damage they can do to Trump. But at the moment, I don't see what more they can get. Given the what we know today. I mean, unless other things are going to come out, but at least what from what we know today. Um, I mean, there are several aspects to this. First of all, there's the aspect of, well, should they have been having this conversation on Signal rather than using the skiff, which is where you're supposed to have these conversations. Now, my view is that from what one can gather, there's really nothing in these conversations. They were throwing around ideas. There was nothing classified about it, and when John Ratcliffe today said something like, "Well, this is what happens in any office. People communicate with one another via Signal, or that this is just simply an accepted form of communication whereby and lots of people can take part. They don't all have to be physically in the same space." Um, as long as, of course, there was no classified information that was communicated. But and that I think that may well come to be the crux of it, and that's where Goldberg comes in. Goldberg makes this claim. He was there. He saw this. He was there. He saw this classified information that was exchanged. This has been denied. Hexeth has denied this, and Caroline Leavitt, the White House press spokesman, she has also denied that there was any classified information relayed during these conversations. And I think Ratcliffe also seems to be suggesting that. So that part is I think they're clear on that. Ultimately, it's going to rest on, well, did Hexeth disclose highly detailed secrets of an impending military operation? Did he do it on an app that could easily be broken by other services, other countries' intelligence services? I don't think he did. I have so little belief in Jeffrey Goldberg that I think he's lying. I think he's seeing this opportunity. Like this is an early harbinger of a suckers and losers in 2020. Trump admires Hitler in 2024. I think he's just a liar. I think he's just a low life, a scumbag, who who without question um, believes that lying is justifiable in the service of a noble cause. Just like so when he lied in order to bring about the invasion of Iraq in 2003, he certainly believed that he did it in the service of a noble cause. When he lied about the suckers and losers, he believed that he did it in the service of a noble cause to destroy Trump. So I don't really believe any aspect of it. I am amused though by the, the Democrats bringing now this whole uh, self righteous, sanctimonious worrying about secrets. So, foreign intelligence services are the secrets. I mean, after all that we know with the Hillary Clinton emails, remember with Hillary Clinton, the moment she got that position as Obama's Secretary of State, she set up her own server, her own homebrew server. She didn't let tell anyone about that. She didn't let anyone know that that's what she was doing. And of course, we know why she did it. She did it so that she would have a control over the historical record, and she did it so that she can do her own private business for the Clinton Foundation without anyone ever finding out about it. And she did it because she violated the promise that she made to Obama when she accepted the position of Secretary of State, namely that she wouldn't do any work for the Clinton Foundation while she was Secretary of State. So she did it with an absolute intent to deceive and to lie to the American public, to lie to the president, and to destroy the historical record. She would control the record, and which is what she did. With her famous 33,000 emails, 33,000 emails, which she claimed was about or about her exercise routine and planning for daughter Chelsea's wedding. That took 33,000 emails. And the Democrats and the media continue to defend Hillary Clinton for that. And keep in mind, no one would have found out about the Hillary Clinton emails, but for for an accident. She had kept quiet about this. She didn't, so they didn't know. The public didn't know that essentially she was withholding the historical record. There is the Public Records Act, whereby you can't destroy historical records. Then no official is permitted to destroy historical records. But she did. And she always intended to do that. And Julian says, I don't see what is wrong in getting control on a private email server. Well, normally, if you have a private email server, that's fine. What you can't do is be a public official and use a private email server, because as a public official, you have to preserve your records. That's your obligation. There is a Public Records Act. You have to preserve all of your records. And you're not. Even if you use a private email, your own personal email, that's still going to be on the server. So that's still. So therefore, you can't evade the Public Records Act, because that's still going to be on the server, even if you use your Gmail account. What she did was to create her own server so that she would be able to get around the Public Records Act. So that was her intent. There was no there was no ands, ifs, and buts about what she was doing. Now, in this case, from what one can gather, they were basically having these were the principles, and they were not really saying anything. From I mean, from what Goldberg reports, they were just exchanging um, banalities. What would normally take place in any conversation, in the conversation in the Oval Office, and some people are for a military operation, some people are against, some people are sitting on the fence, seeing which way the wind's blowing, and that's how these conversations go. Now, it's possible that the intent was always to destroy this record. That they intended to destroy um, this chat um, after the fact. And that's possible. That may have been the intent. In which case, that would be a violation of the Public Records Act. Um, but I don't really know that if that was the intent. We know that was Hillary Clinton's intent because Hillary Clinton did indeed destroy her records. So but we don't know whether this was this was the goal here. And the exchange they had, well, it was actually quite interesting. I mean, I find it very amusing when people are worrying about the destruction of public records. I mean, leave aside the Hillary Clinton destruction of public records, and but remember when Mueller, the people who worked for Mueller in the investigation, who to a man wiped their phones. So they were using these public phones, well, not public phones. I mean, they were using the government provided phones, and then they wiped them. And they wiped them in a very ingenious way through by repeatedly getting the password wrong. So apparently, you can do that if you keep repeatedly getting your password wrong. Then you can wipe your phone. So they wiped their phones, and then but again, no one really thought very much about that. And then I remember when the Hillary Clinton thing came up, and those crowd at MSNBC insisted, absolutely insisted, no one, no intelligence agency, no, not the Russians, not the Chinese, not the North Koreans, not the Iranians, no one hacked into Hillary Clinton's server. So there was everything that the Republicans were saying was a lie. No one hacked into her server. Well, how the hell do you know that? If there's no security, then not just a foreign intelligence service. It's just about anybody could hack into that into her homebrew server. But that was that was the, the story. They had to put that story out there and make it about Republicans pounds. Trump, it's always the Republicans pounds. When it's an embarrassing story for the Democrats, it's this, you don't report the embarrassing content of the story. You instead make it about Republicans pounce. They pounced unfairly on the Hillary Clinton email. So the question then is, where this was a means of communication, fairly easy means of communication. Now, there was nothing in this conversation, from what one can gather from Goldberg, why anybody would want to wipe it. I mean, why anyone would want to destroy this record. Now, it's true that J.D. Vance and Hegseth spoke very negatively about the Europeans. And of course this was being picked up, and the Guardian and Politico were, oh my God, look at the way that the Trump people are talking about the Europeans. And but of course, there's a couple of points about that. In the first place, the Europeans are are hardly under any delusion as to what the Trump people think of them. I mean, they're fairly explicit about it. I mean, J.D. Vance spoke about this at the Munich Security Conference, so there's nothing surprising that he was very disparaging about the Europeans in this conversation. The thrust of what he was saying and the thrust of what Stephen Miller was saying was that, well, if the Americans go in and bomb the Houthis, who benefits from this? I mean, they basically, the United States really doesn't use the Red Sea and the Suez Canal for its trade. The United States goes around the Cape, and so therefore, there's it's minimal, the damage that the Houthis do to American shipping and American commerce. So why are we going to do this? Why, just for the Europeans? And so that was very much in the spirit of America First. America First. They say, well, I mean, why are we undertaking these risks? Attacking the Houthis when really they're not doing us any damage at all. On the other hand, 40% of the Europeans' trade goes through the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. The Europeans would be hurt by the Houthis. Well, so Vance is saying, well, why should we do this with the Europeans? What have they ever done for us? Now, what's interesting about that, I mean, yes, in terms of America First, the logic is impeccable. But of course, it's also it's a deliberate misplay, because that isn't the issue with the Houthis. The issue isn't the Europeans. The issue is Israel. And obviously, it's Israel that the United States, under Biden, and not just under Biden, it goes all the way back to Obama in 2015, and Trump in his first term have been waging this war against the Houthis for no reason other than Israel. The Houthis have been doing almost minimal damage, certainly to American shipping, but minimal damage to any other shipping. The only shipping that they have targeted, not especially effectively, incidentally, but they have targeted, have been ships going to Israel. So it's Israel that has a problem with the Houthis. So Vance does a deliberate misplay in making it about, oh, it's the Americans, the Europeans, we're doing this for them, and why we do this, and then I'm not happy with this. And it was quite a sensible ploy on his part, because the other principals in that meeting said, I take your point. I think Hexeth said that. I can't remember, somebody else I think made that point. I think you're right about that. But we do have an interest in maintaining freedom of navigation, or whatever. Even though when they were having this conversation, the Houthis hadn't done anything. They hadn't done anything for a long time. They hadn't done anything during the period of the ceasefire. So the Houthis had done again fairly ineffectually, but what damage they'd done, it was attacks on Israel, and they maintained a moratorium on attacks during the ceasefire. So when they were having this conversation, according to Goldberg, this was done, at the time when there were no attacks, none. So it's not like the Americans were sitting there planning a retaliation for what the Houthis had done. There'd been no attacks. So in a way, they were in anticipation of impending attacks now that Israel had abandoned the ceasefire. And that once Israel has abandoned the ceasefire, then the Houthi attacks would restart. And so this whole plan of attacking the Houthis was done in a way, it's like in coordination with what Israel was doing. Israel was just abandoning its ceasefire unilaterally. It was the Trump's own ceasefire. They abandoned this, and in anticipation of the Houthis' impending attacks on ships heading for Israel, the United States was planning these attacks on the Houthis. But Vance couldn't really make that point. I mean, if Vance were to say that and say, hey, I mean, why are we fighting this? If we're America first, why are we doing this for Israel? Then he's not going to get any kind of that wouldn't go down at all well in any principals meeting. So Vance did it in a very clever way, expressing skepticism, not because, well, hey, America's doing this for Israel. He said he makes it about the Europeans. We're doing this for the Europeans. But of course, America is not doing this for the Europeans. America is doing this for Israel. Now, I think it's to Vance's credit that he actually raised this issue. I mean, given that this is supposed to be an America first administration. So he says, "Well, it's an America first." So I think we should concern with is this, what does America get out of pointless attacks on the Houthis, which we've been doing since 2015, when Obama unleashed this war against the Houthis. So it's 10 years. So he realized this. Anyway, that was that's the question is what happens now in the conversation. I think if there isn't any more developments, then I express I think Waltz will probably survive. There does remain a question, and I think we're going to have to address that question: who exactly invited Goldberg to be on that call? Because whoever did it, they did it with a very clear goal in mind. You don't invite Jeffrey Goldberg. You could invite what was it? No, I was going to say Maggie Haberman, but Trump has a very clever formulation for her. He calls her Maggot Hagerman. Yeah, Maggot Hagerman. Because but at least they would make at least some sense. Bring on Maggie Haberman or Peter Baker. But bringing in Goldberg, then you're doing it with that has a real malevolent intent to it. So that's that. Now the other thing that is kind of interesting was this negotiations that have been taking place in Riyadh between the Americans, the Russians, and the Ukrainians on this Black Sea ceasefire. Now that again is a little puzzling because, first of all, there's really no war going on in the Black Sea. I mean, to the extent that there is any fighting. I mean, more or less, the Russians have moved their fleet out of the Black Sea. They'd been attacked by Ukrainian drones, and they've essentially moved them out of the Black Sea. The, there was the grain. They were threatening to attack ships heading out of Odessa and through the Dardanelles Straits, to get Ukrainian grain out. And then there were the ships heading back through the Dardanelles Straits to Odessa. And so there was a complex agreement that had been worked out as part of the Black Sea Grain Initiative, so whereby the Russians wouldn't attack these ships, either the ships leaving Odessa filled with grain and going through the Dardanelles, they wouldn't be attacked by the Russians, and then the empty ships going through the Dardanelles, heading towards Odessa and other Ukrainian Black Sea ports, which might or might not be carrying contraband. They also wouldn't be attacked, and that was the Black Sea Grain Initiative, which kind of went on for a while. But there was a proviso there, which was that the Russians would be able to get their own grain and their own fertilizer products out onto the world markets. And they thought this was part of the Black Sea Grain Initiative that went on in 2022, 2023. But that never happened. As always with these lifting these, getting these deals and getting the West to drop its sanctions. It never happened. The West never drops its sanctions. So the Russians still weren't able to get their grain and fertilizer out, or at least they had difficulties with it. I mean, they're still obviously getting grain to markets, the world markets, but not not as easily as they had before. But anyway, but what happened then was that the Ukrainians were still able to ship their grain out through the Black Sea. They kept close to the western coast of the Black Sea, and they weren't attacked by the Russians. So they just shipped them out. And so really, the Black Sea Grain Initiative just died on the vine. I mean, it didn't matter anymore because the Ukrainians were able to get their grain out through the Black Sea without getting attacked by the Russians. And the Russians still were under sanction. So suddenly now we're back to the Black Sea Grain Initiative, and we're talking about the same things all over again, namely that the Russians want their sanctions lifted on the export of agricultural products and the fertilizer. So let's first of all look at the readout. Today there was the agreement that was announced both in Washington and in Moscow that they've now reached this yet another Black Sea deal. And here, so let's first of all read out the what the yeah. So here we are. This is from the Kremlin, first of all. Main results of the meeting of expert groups of Russia and the USA. And then it says, one, in accordance with the agreement between the presidents of Russia and the United States, the Russian and American sides agreed to ensure the implementation of the Black Sea Initiative, which includes ensuring the safety of navigation in the Black Sea, non-use of force, and prevention of the use of commercial vessels for military purposes, while organizing appropriate control measures through inspection of such vessels. So this would be again going back to some of those, deals whereby the Russians would have some say in the ships going through the Dardanelles and onto Ukraine's Black Sea ports, which may well have been carrying contraband, armaments. And part of the deal had been that the Russians could inspect these ships to make sure that they weren't bringing in weapons. But that none of that ever happened. And anyway, then we get the next thing. The United States will help restore access for Russian agricultural and fertilizer exports to the world market. Will help restore, reduce the cost of marine insurance, which has been a big problem for the Russians, obviously, and expand access to ports and payment systems to conduct such transactions. These are all the things that Russia had to do. Huge rise in cost of marine insurance and difficulties in getting access to ports, because a lot of ports where Russia used to deliver its grain were no longer accessible, and the payment system became very complicated. But the Americans will help do this. And then it goes on, paragraphs 1 and 2 shall come into force. Okay. So this is the big proviso for the Russians. Paragraphs 1 and 2. So go back to paragraph. What is 1 and 2? 1 and 2. They're saying, in accordance with the agreement, blah blah, the prevention, blah blah. Well, so in the Russian and American sides agreed to ensure the implementation of the Black Sea Initiative, which includes ensuring the safety of navigation in the Black Sea, non-use of force, and prevention of the use of commercial vessels for military purposes. That's one. And then 2, the United States will help restore access for Russian agricultural and fertilizer exports to the world market. And then paragraphs 1 and 2 shall come into force after lifting sanctions, restrictions from Roselkhozbank, which means essentially that Russia's agricultural bank, and other financial organizations involved in ensuring operations on international trade in food products, including fish products and fertilizer, connecting them to SWIFT, opening the necessary correspondent accounts. So this is a major lifting of sanctions on Russian trade. They're lifting the sanctions restrictions from the agricultural bank and other financial organizations involved in ensuring operations on international trade in food products and fertilizers, connecting them to SWIFT. In other words, a return to the SWIFT payment system. So that's a major thing, and it's not clear that the United States alone can do this thing. This was getting kicked off SWIFT. That was a joint operation by the United States and the Europeans. So even if the United States says, "Yeah, sure, we'll help you," it's not at all clear that the Europeans are going to go along with this. And then he goes on, lifting restrictions on trade finance transactions, lifting sanctions. Is this the next one? Yeah. So this is what comes. Paragraphs 1 and 2 shall come into force after. So lifting sanctions restrictions on the agricultural bank, returning to SWIFT, lifting restrictions on trade finance transactions, lifting sanctions restrictions on companies producing and exporting food, including fish products and fertilizers, as well as lifting restrictions on the work of insurance companies and cargoes of food. So really, what the Russians are saying, that this Black Sea deal only comes into effect if and when these sanctions are lifted. and then goes lifting restrictions on servicing ships in ports and sanctions against ships under the Russian flag, lifting restrictions on the supply of agricultural machinery to the Russian Federation. So all of these things, all of these sanctions have to be lifted before this Black Sea deal comes into effect, or so the Russians claim. And then three, Russia and the United States agreed to develop measures to implement the agreements between the presidents of the two countries on a ban on strikes of energy facilities in Russia and Ukraine they developed measures, agreed to develop measures to implement the agreements on this on a ban on strikes in energy facilities. So that there's still no agreement there. They're just going to develop measures to implement the agreements. Starting on March the 18th. So in theory, it supposedly had started on March the 18th, but they haven't yet agreed on how they would implement this, with the possibility of extension and withdrawal from the agreement in the event of non-compliance. And then Russia and the United States welcome good offices of third countries aimed at supporting that. Russia and the United States will continue to work to achieve a strong and lasting peace. So that's the Kremlin readout, quite detailed in terms of what Russia expects. And Russia clearly expects a major lifting of sanctions. And now this is the White House readout. So what the White House did is they had two separate statements. So the first statement is the outcome of the negotiations between the United States and Russia, and then there's a separate statement about the outcome of the negotiations between the United States and Ukraine. So this is the one with the United States and Russia. And so the White House says, in line with presidential level discussions between President Trump and President Putin, the United States facilitated bilateral technical level talks with the Russian delegation March the 23rd to the 25th in Riyadh. Following those discussions, the United States and Russia have agreed to ensure safe navigation, eliminate the use of force, and prevent the use of commercial vessels for military purposes in the Black Sea. So here they are: the ensure safe navigation, and again, prevent the use of commercial vessels for military purpose, and obviously to eliminate the use of force in the Black Sea. So that would be the ceasefire, Black Sea ceasefire. So, and then the United States will help restore Russia's access to the world market for agricultural and fertilizer exports. So the Americans then say this: they will help restore lower maritime insurance costs, which the Russians also pointed, and enhance access to ports and payment systems for such transactions. So that's very similar in wording to what the Russians said. And let me just go back there. All right. For such transactions. And then the United States and Russia agreed to develop measures for implementing President Trump's and President Putin's agreement to ban strikes on energy facilities of Russia and Ukraine. So agreed to develop measures for implementing them. The United States and Russia welcome the good offices of third countries with a view towards supporting the implementation of the energy and maritime agreements. But notice how the American statement doesn't get into any of the details that the Russian statement went into. I mean, they all that the Americans said. It says the United States will help restore Russia's access to the world market for agricultural and fertilizer exports, lower maritime insurance costs, and enhance access to ports and payment systems for such transactions. The Russians went into considerable detail as to what they expected. The United States only said, "Well, we'll help restore. We'll help restore." That's how they say, "We will restore. We'll help. We'll do what we can." Lower maritime insurance costs and enhance access to ports and payment systems for such transactions. And then the United States agreed to develop measures for implementing the ban on strikes on energy facilities. Um, and then the United States and Russia will continue working towards achieving a durable and lasting peace, again similar to the Russian statement. So more or less, the United States and the Russians are similar statements, except that the Russians are first of all saying that they expect a very comprehensive lifting of sanctions, but the Russians are also saying that unless that is done, that will be the condition for there to be any ceasefire on the Black Sea. Let's just go back again and get the way the Russians have formulated it. Paragraphs 1 and 2 shall come into force after lifting sanctions restrictions from this agricultural bank and other financial organizations involved in ensuring operational international trade in food products, and so connecting them to SWIFT. So in other words, as far as the Russians are concerned, there is no deal unless unless these sanctions and restrictions are lifted. Anyway, this is the statement of this is where is it? This is the statement from the Ukraine and from about the meeting between the Americans and the Ukrainians. And as in line with presidential level discussions between President Trump and President Zelensky, the United States facilitated bilateral technical level talks with the Ukrainian delegation, and blah, blah. And then the United States and Ukraine have agreed to ensure safe navigation, eliminate the use of force, and prevent the use of commercial vessels for military purposes in the Black Sea. So similar to the wording in the Russia statement. The United States and Ukraine agreed that the United States remains committed to helping achieve the exchange of prisoners of war, the release of civilian detainees, and the return of forcibly transferred Ukrainian children. So that's something that you remember. The issue of the children came up during the discussion between the Ukrainians and Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz. From that was last week. They talked about this issue of the Ukrainian children, and then Trump also talked about that during his phone conversation with Zelensky. And then the United States and Ukraine agreed to develop measures for implementing President Trump's and President Zelensky's agreement to ban strikes against energy facilities of Russia and Ukraine. The United States and Ukraine welcomed the good offices of third countries with a view towards supporting the implementation of the energy and maritime agreements. The United States and Ukraine will continue working towards achieving a durable, lasting peace. So those are the statements, and you can see there's great considerable similarity between the Russian and the Ukrainian statements. The Ukrainian statement, the difference there was that they brought up the issue of the children, and you know the prisoners of war, which didn't come up in the Russian statement. But the big difference is, of course, is that the Russians are saying, well, that the condition is that you lift these sanctions. Now, I can't. I don't know to what extent the Americans can just simply do that. I mean, this whole sanctions and the SWIFT system, all of that has been done in coordination with the Europeans. I don't think Europeans are going to go for it. They're not going to just allow Russia to go back into the SWIFT system. They're not going to allow Russia to unload its agricultural products and its fertilizer in any ports in Europe, and I have my doubt whether they're going to go for cooperation on maritime insurance so as to lower Russia's insurance rates. I mean, the Americans can say we're going to help you there, but I don't know if the Europeans will go for it. So, but without that, then I don't know if there's the deal. There's much of a deal here. Now, I don't necessarily think that it's a huge issue because there really hasn't been very much activity on the Black Sea. I mean, in much the same way with the whole attacks on one another's energy infrastructure. I mean, it doesn't seem to have made very much difference at all. But at least as far as attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure hasn't particularly harmed them. I mean, they get blackouts, brief blackouts, but nothing long lasting. Now, it's possible that the Ukrainian attacks on Russia's oil refineries, oil depots are causing some damage to Russia's economy, and it would certainly be in Russia's interest to bring these attacks to a halt. Remember, they came close to a deal last year before Zelensky ordered the invasion of Kursk, but they've been negotiating for some time in Qatar to have this moratorium on attacks on energy infrastructure. So that it was the invasion of Kursk that brought that to an end. So that seems to be more doable than the Black Sea. The Black Sea deal just doesn't seem to me to be at all doable. I mean, the what Russia's asking, I don't think the Americans have the will, and I don't think they even have the capability of lifting these. This is a very comprehensive sanctions, but I don't think it's going to make very much difference because the war isn't being fought in the Black Sea. So really, we had 2022, 2023, we had the Black Sea Grain Initiative, and then when that just fell through, precisely on the issue that Russia, which was expecting sanctions relief and never got any sanctions relief, when it fell through on that, it essentially, that's it. There was no deal, but Ukraine still managed to get its grain out by staying close to the western coast of the Black Sea, going through the straits. And Russia really didn't attack any of these boats or ships rather, and didn't seize ships on suspicion that they were carrying contraband. So I don't know. This is a lot of negotiation, but to me, it doesn't seem like this amounts to a great deal. But anyway, let's take a look at our locals page. So to what our the gagglers who worry about the mental state of the dogs and the concern that the dogs have expressed about about the tip jar. So I really appreciate the people who contribute generously there. That's really very, very, very kind of you. Robert says hello from sunny 60-degree New Jersey. Wow. 60 degrees in New Jersey. Well, that's pretty nice. Spring is there. There's no spring here. And you're getting these the long evenings, And we're not getting any long evenings. In theory, we're supposed to get the long evenings. They're going to start this weekend. But you in New Jersey, you in the United States, have been enjoying now for several weeks the long evenings. So, but very nice in New Jersey. Judy Hotchkiss, always very nice. Good to see you. Always thank you so much for your insightful contributions. So, Judy, thank you for your generosity as always, Judy. So, Judy says, do you have any reason to believe that Goldberg being added to the security chat was anything more than accidental? Well, I find it difficult to believe that it was accidental. Let's put it that way. I so far I've seen no evidence that that this was done deliberately. On the other hand, I find it almost impossible to believe that it wasn't. I mean, why would any person choose him, of all people, of all possible journalists, to insert him into this chat? I mean, there are plenty of journalists that you can include if you want to include them, but here it doesn't sound like there were any other journalists, not one journalist, with the exception of Goldberg. So, with the exception of this person who obviously had hostile, malign intent toward Donald Trump, and even his actions suggested that he had hostile and malign intent. He's playing this sort of cute, oh gosh, look, isn't this these strange things that are happening, and I don't really get it. Somebody gave me an invitation, and I thought, well, maybe this is a joke. Somebody was playing a practical joke on me. So maybe this was I was being set up. But nonetheless, he took part in this in these meetings. He didn't say anything, but he didn't wonder, hey, what am I doing here? Which you might think about. I mean, anybody else would think, this may be this is a high level meeting of principals. I'm here. These are all principals who have the highest possible security clearance. They're all taking part in this conversation. I, being just a journalist, I don't have that high level security clearance. So what am I doing here? Aren't I in danger of basically violation of some Secrets Act in taking part in this chat? It sounds, you would say, hey, this looks like it was a mistake. Nonetheless, he stays there, doesn't ask anyone whether, are you sure I'm supposed to be here? And then he stays around for this for this attack on the Houthis. Doesn't say anything, just leaves the chat, and then writes this article, and then he drops the article the day before this big congressional hearing with Trump's intelligence chief. These are his big three intelligence chief: Ratcliffe, the CIA, with Kash Patel, the FBI, and then Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI. So he does this, provides the Democrats with this this line of attack. So my view then is that the whole thing had clearly been a setup. Somebody had set this up. Now I don't know who did it. I would doubt that it was Mike Waltz. I mean, because for Waltz to do this, Waltz would be endangering his position. It would be basically endangering his political career. whatever doubts he may have about Trump, Trump is his meal ticket. This is, his. This is a big leap for him in his political career, and if he falls out with Trump, then that would be the end for him. So I don't think Waltz would do this. I think that there are Vindman and Eric Charamella and Fiona Hill types still working, whether it's in the National Security Council, the State Department, or wherever, who basically know Jeffrey Goldberg well and wanted to bring him in order to try and do as much damage as possible to Trump. So now it's entirely speculative on my part, but I don't believe that this is an accident. It's just, I mean, if there were several journalists who were taking part, then maybe you could say it's an accident. But for this journalist, this person, knowing his animus, knowing that this magazine is really the railhead of anti-Trumpism, to get him of all people into that chat room, then that's not an accident. That was clearly the setup, and the Democrats are gonna make a meal of this. I mean, that's understandable. I mean, this is they have an opportunity, and that's what you do in politics. Trump gave them an opening, or whoever did this, who invited them, they gave the Democrats an opportunity. They're going to run with it. I think they'll probably have congressional hearings specifically about this, and who knows? They may, this may be the issue on which they will try to impeach Trump when they regain the House, if they regain the House next year. Well, that's not. Hey, this is this the most serious imaginable breach of security, and they will use that as a ground for impeachment. So the Democrats may well be laying the foundation for an impeachment of Trump. So I I think this was a setup. Now, who did it? That I think we don't know. Just like we didn't know for a while in 2019 as to who set up Trump over that telephone call. I mean, then subsequently we learned about this guy Eric Charamella, and then we learned about Alexander Vindman, and of course then we learned about Fiona Hill, and then we kind of put the pieces together. And I think we're going to find out something about here as to who was it who invited Jeffrey Goldberg into this chat. And Carlos says, anyway, thank you very much, Judy, as always. Thank you. And then Carlos says, at first I thought it was a joke post, but I couldn't find the punchline. Well, yes, I mean, it did seem like a joke because you're thinking to yourself, well, what's Jeffrey Goldberg of all people doing in this meeting of Trump principles? Jeffrey Goldberg. And now we're asked to believe that Mike Waltz would invite him in. I don't believe that. Whatever Waltz is about his background, and everything else. I mean, Glenn Greenwald said something like, "Oh well, Mike Waltz and Jeffrey Goldberg share the same mindset. They agree on most foreign policy issues. They're neocons, they're interventionists, and particularly they're in agreement on Israel and the Houthis and everything else. And to a certain extent, that's correct. However, Waltz is now the national security advisor to Trump. His entire raison d'etre is to keep Trump happy. It would make very little sense for Waltz now to sabotage his own position, his own career, by uh, doing any favors for Jeffrey Goldberg. So I don't believe Waltz did this. That you'd have to. It was somebody else um, who thought this would be a cute idea. Um, I think there may be more things like this. I mean, it's clear that that within the Trump administration that there is a certain lack of discipline. There's a certain lack of um, consciousness of security. I mean, Ratcliffe's claim today that, oh well, communication on signal is perfectly permissible as long as you don't transmit classified information. This is like an office. Everyone's in the office is in the same chat room, so it enables everyone to easy communication. Well, I mean, that's a cute argument, but the fact is that there are a lot of people in Washington, a lot of people in Europe who are absolutely determined to destroy Trump, to do everything they can to sabotage and hobble Trump, just like as they did during the first term. So therefore, you would have to think that you've got to be a little more security conscious. I mean, there are people out to do you in, destroy you, and they should know that the signal is, I mean, yes, end-to-end encryption and all the rest, but of course it's easy enough to hack into. I mean, it's much lower level security than the skiff. So, and who are the people who would want to hurt Trump? Well, I don't think it's Russia. I don't think it's China. I don't think, but I do think that it could well be the British. I think it could well be the French, the Germans, the Poles. A lot of the European intelligence services, they don't like Trump. They really, really want to sabotage the Trump team. So, if you're a principal, you should be aware of this and say, hey, shouldn't we be more cognizant of potential hackers, people who are listening in and who are going to try to embarrass us? I would have thought. I mean, the British, their fingerprints were all over Russiagate, Christopher Steele, and all of that. The British were absolutely, up to their neck in Russiagate, as were the Ukrainians, of course. The British are obviously very unhappy about Trump, so therefore they would absolutely do whatever they can to embarrass and humiliate Trump. So again, if you're a principal, if you're Hexeth or the rest of you, think this isn't the way to communicate. Signal is not a great idea. So so there is a laxity and a lack of discipline among the Trump people that could end up hurting them. It may be this, maybe there'll be something else, but this could absolutely end up hurting you. Just like Trump's abysmal appointments in his first term, the fact that he hired someone like Fiona Hill, and that people like Vindman, had the the whole of the White House to work in and spy on and do whatever they could to hurt Trump. I mean, that it ended up almost breaking the Trump presidency. So um, you know, there's really ultimately whatever you say about the Democrats' opportunism, but ultimately there's no justification for what the Trump people did. I mean, using signal as a way of communicating. Robert, always good to see you, and thank you so much, Robert, for your generosity. And Robert says, regarding the Houthis, Mearsheimer argues weapons technology favors non-state groups like the Houthis over states, as advancements in technology make missiles ever more potent. Drink. As advancements in technology make missiles ever more potent while ever more affordable, it's only a matter of time until warships and aircraft carriers become so vulnerable that they are effectively useless. It could be that the US wants to make an example out of the Houthis to discourage other non state actors from going down this path, in addition to doing Israel's bidding. Well, I guess so, but in a way, I mean, I agree with that. I think that it is true. For instance, this drones. It seems to me that that is the weapon of the future. Very inexpensive to produce, and they do a great deal of damage. They're doing far more damage now than artillery pieces. So the early stage of the war, clearly all the damage that was being done was through artillery, and the Russians had clearly the edge with artillery. They could produce the artillery. No one could quite produce as much artillery as the Russians, but the drones have kind of equalized that. The Ukrainians are producing a lot of drones, and the drone factories are humming along. And the drones are doing a lot of damage to the Russians. I mean, again, the all the attacks on the economic sites, the oil refineries, and so on. That's all from the drone. And Ukraine now produces something like 40% of the weapons it's using in the war. I mean, before it was something like 0% that Ukraine was producing domestically. Now it's about 40%. So relatively inexpensive. The technology isn't that sophisticated, and I think the Houthis are doing something quite similar, um, and that's why they're quite difficult to deal with. I mean, the Americans have been doing this for a while. The Saudis have been doing it for a while, but they haven't succeeded um, in that. Now, that doesn't mean you can win a war that way. And the Houthis are not really winning a war, but you can absolutely do a lot of damage. And you can do a damage to an aircraft carrier, um, and ships and so on. So that's right. Now, but I don't know whether if the U.S. wants to make an example, but they're not really making an example because it doesn't look to me like any of these attacks on the Houthis have been particularly successful. I mean, Obama didn't succeed, Trump didn't succeed, Biden didn't succeed, and now Trump is launching it again. And his ridiculous assertion, I think he did it today, that, well, this was hugely successful. How was it successful? I mean, if the Houthis have missiles and have the drones, then it hasn't been successful. I mean, you'd have to kill off all of the Houthis, which isn't doable, and it's not at all clear any that any of the attacks in the past have been able to kill off the Houthis. Um, it's a little like with the Hamas. You can just kill off this or that leader, as they did with Hamas. That still doesn't end Israel's problems with Hamas. They're still so where we have to crush Hamas. So it's in the same way we have to crush the Houthis. So I mean, I agree that this the in a way it's um, the 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 technology that is relatively inexpensive. It's within the price range of non-state actors, such as the Houthis, that they can do this and they can do damage. That's the significance of the drones. But I don't see what exactly the United States accomplishes. So this becomes a familiar routine, and the Americans have done this for decades of lobbing missiles and bombs at various characters. Where it used to be in Lebanon, they used to do these attacks. It was like that was even before Hezbollah, but they used to launch these attacks in Lebanon, um, and then they've attacks in Yemen, the attacks in Syria, attacks in Somalia. So you do these things. It's a kind of an ongoing thing, but without accomplishing any strategic goals. I mean, does anyone really believe that this attack on the Houthis, and if they can launch another attack on the Houthis, is actually going to eliminate the Houthis once and for all? I mean, I really just don't see it at all. So I mean, it's just yet another kind of a pointless military operation that the Americans just do year in, year out, decade in, decade out, and nothing changes. Again, I mean, I just remember when they were doing this in Lebanon. There's this they had these battleships in the Mediterranean, and they would just keep lobbing missiles into Lebanon. I have no idea nobody ever really knew who exactly they were targeting. Sometimes it was the Shia, sometimes it was the Druze. I mean, they were just kind of lobbing these missiles. But it looked impressive. It looked like as if America was doing something. So I don't think any of this is going to do anything. And as I say, the whole plan with I mean, this is a classic of the stupid wars in the Middle East that Trump was supposedly going to get them out of. But of course, you're not going to get them out of it if the goal is to do whatever you can for Israel. And we've talked about this before. Whenever you talk to any of these people, whether it's the Trump people, Democrats, or whatever, the only thing that matters to them, their understanding of the Middle East, is Israel's security. There's no other interest, no other goal, no other purpose in the Middle East other than Israel's security. So you have to do whatever you can for Israel's security. Nobody quite explains, well, how does attacking the Houthis, or how does threatening Iran, how does that actually help Israel's security? But no, that's the only goal. And so when if you try to raise anything else like stability and just regional peace, and above all, heaven forbid, you try to raise the issue of a Palestinian state, then you're out of it. It's the only thing matters, Israel's security. So anyway, Robert says, Anne Marie, thank you so much as always for your generosity. So thank you, and thank you above all for all of your contributions and insights on for the Gaggle Music Club. And so I think all Gagglers, and myself included, are learning a great deal about your insights into music and the playing of music and so on. So I think we're all very fortunate, Anne Marie, for to benefit from your insights, and hope that you'll at some point be able to post more examples of your own work. That would be really, really fascinating and enjoyable and worthwhile for all gagglers. But so thank you so much, Anne Marie. So Robert then says, according to ChatGPT, Ukraine generates more than half of its electricity from nuclear power, effectively serving to safeguard its electricity production from attack. Well, yeah, that's interesting. I think that's right, and I think they're going to move even further towards nuclear power. And that's clear even in the talks they've been having with the Americans, that this is clearly where they're going. But that is very interesting. More than um, half of its consumption. I wonder if that just simply in terms of its domestic consumption, because I think it's Ukraine also imports a lot of electricity. So I wonder what proportion of its electricity consumption comes from nuclear power, as opposed to how much electricity it imports from others. Because obviously it imports a great deal of electricity from others. And so I'd be curious about how much of its electricity consumption comes from nuclear power, how much from domestic nuclear power, and how much is imported. And then Robert says, "Who better than Hercule Poirot to get to the bottom of how Goldberg came to be included in the chat?" Yeah, I think so. I think there would have to be. It's very interesting. I mean, that it was announced today by Trump they're going to have an inquiry into what really happened. Um, well, I think it's interesting. Will they get to the bottom of it? Um, like, but clearly, they have a problem. That you don't just do this. This doesn't just come about, through some cock up that a creature like Jeffrey Goldberg it gets in on this chat. Just simply spying there and taking notes for ultimately the hit piece that he is going to write. So this was somebody did that. Somebody pulled that number, just like they Charamella and Vindman were there in order to, and as was Fiona Hill, their job was to impeach Trump. Then that's how they saw their job, and they were looking for the opportunity to provide the material to the Democrats for impeachment, and they seized on the phone call with Zelensky. That was the opportunity, but that's all they were doing. Vindman, Hill, Charamella, and probably others. They had no other business in the White House other than gathering material for an impeachment. Look, I think it's looking like there's still people like that around, and they're trying to find other ways to impeach Trump. And Marx 2023 says, seems to me that Christopher Steele is involved. I notice he's doing the rounds in the Western propaganda media. Yeah, I noticed that too. It's very interesting that he is, that the media call him up. This utter slime ball, truly disgusting creature. Did untold damage, not just to the United States but to the world, with his collection of lies about Trump and Russia. I mean, I think the whole crisis between the United States and Russia, he contributed. He more than anyone else contributed to it. And yeah, he's around. I don't know whether Steele himself is. I do think MI6, the British intelligence, is involved. When it comes to spying, when it comes to propaganda, when it comes to public relations, the British are the masters. So um, I wouldn't be at all surprised if the British have somehow got themselves in on this the signal. I don't quite know how they did it, but I can see the kind of the British were involved with Jeffrey Goldberg. I don't know. We'll 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 find out. I hope we'll find out. But I absolutely do agree. The British are a real problem. That they're in all sorts of ways there are problems. So I think they may well have been involved. Um, and then Robert says, by the way, the judge blocking Trump's deportation orders turns out to be the same judge who signed. Yep, that's right. That's Boasberg. Yeah, that's right. He was the chief judge and the FISA court signed off on many of the FISA requests to wiretap Trump Tower. Yeah, that's right, without any questions asked. So this is judge whose whole thing about due process. You see, he's a big one on due process. Oh yeah, we got to we have to make sure that people's rights are protected. He's a big civil liberties guy, and yet he just signed off on these FISA warrants on the basis of nothing, on the basis of ludicrous claims made by the likes of Peter Strzok, that somehow we have to accept Christopher Steele's claims and as true, and the nonsense that a newspaper story, I think it was the Associated Press, which itself was I know it was a Mother Jones article. I can't remember. It was the which itself was it Mother Jones or the whoever that guy Michael whatever his name was Michael Isikoff. I can't remember who he was working for at the time. I think maybe Yahoo he was working for. So the claim that somehow Yahoo is an independent source of information, that somehow that confirmed the claims of Christopher Steele, even though Michael Isikoff had been briefed by Steele, so it was just simple double dipping. But the point is that this same judge simply accepted this. He, this big due process guy accepted this absolute nonsense. So you're absolutely right, Robert. Is that he's the same judge who signed off on many of the FISA requests to wiretap Trump Tower. He's quite an odd-looking character. Yeah, he does. Yes, by the name of Boasberg, with a face reminiscent of Boris Karloff's. Yes. The strange thing is, a lot of these judges have look very weird. I mean, I've noticed that none of them really looks like I don't know where he look. Yeah, like we say Boris Karloff, the judge in the New York case, the one with that was the civil case that was brought by Big Tish James, claiming that Trump had perpetrated fraud, even though no one had ever claimed to have been defrauded by Trump, but somehow he decided, this judge alone, Judge Engeron, he looked a very weird guy. He's the one who posed bare chested on his Facebook page. So a number of these judges look distinctly weird. So, yeah. But no, I mean, I think but it's a very good point. I mean, that somebody who purports to be so indignant about the lack of due process and was so cavalier about signing off on these FISA warrants, on spying on Carter Page, when you had no evidence at all for this. That you can see the absolute hypocrisy of this. Marty, always very good to see you. Thank you very much for your generosity. Thank you for all the interesting posts from yesterday, because Marty posted some very interesting items about Harold Pinter. We on the Gaggle um, movie uh, club, which is the Monday night screening. We screened yesterday The Servant, starring Dirk Bogarde and James Fox, and with a script written by Harold Pinter. And Harold Pinter was a very interesting character, particularly. I mean, he became obviously very political in through most of his life, but during his early days, and this is from the early 1960s, Pinter really wasn't very political. He became eventually very political, but what was interesting with what Marty posted is he all the various attacks that he launched on American aggression. I mean, obviously Iraq in 2003. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature. I think it was 2005, and he delivered his lecture then in 2005. He was already quite ill by then. But what was amusing that at the time of the bombing of Yugoslavia in 1999, he took a very strong stance against the bombing, which was quite controversial at the time. The liberal opinion had suddenly become very enthusiastic about bombing, where before liberals used to be anti-American. Now suddenly Americans were the good guys, and it's a good thing to bomb countries in the name of humanitarianism. And he wasn't buying that. And he said something like, American foreign policy can be summed up as kiss my ass or I'm going to kick your head in. I think that's how he said, kiss my ass or I'm going to kick your head in. And then he said Milosevic refused to kiss America's ass, so Milosevic got his head kicked in. It's very, very pertinent, and so that you can read that on in the comments to the screening. Watch the movie above all, and you have to remember that also, and I will always remember this from Pinter, that after the arrest of Milosevic, a group of people set up the International Committee to Defend Slobodan Milosevic. And but of course, the media had so demonized Milosevic that it was really nobody wanted to be associated with it. Even people who were attacking the bombing would never dream of joining something like the International Committee to Defend Slobodan Milosevic. Milosevic is a dictator. He was a terrible person. He was a brute. He was a bully. Some people just bought into this rubbish. Even people who should know better, like Pat Buchanan, said, "Oh well, he's a brute. He's a thug," and so on. And so Pinter was approached, and so hey, well, could you join the International Committee to Defend Slobodan Milosevic? And at first he seemed very hesitant to do this for the same reason. Well, hey, I don't want to have my name associated with Milosevic's name. And then when somebody wrote him, to explain that this isn't really about Milosevic, it's about the independence of a state, and that that a NATO court is going to put him on trial. That the same NATO powers that bombed Serbia are now going to put on trial the man who resisted the NATO bombing. And he said, "Yeah, I find your argument persuasive. Include me in the International Committee to Defend Slobodan Milosevic." And so he did that, and Peter Handke, the German writer, he also joined the committee, and he also went on to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. But I always sort of admire Pinter for the fact that he did that. He wasn't cowed by the usual media hysteria. Oh, Milosevic is a horrible person, and people were attacked. The people who joined the Committee to Defend Slobodan Milosevic were attacked, including me. That, oh my God, look at all these disreputable people who have joined this committee. And of course Pinter was attacked for it, but he despised journalists so much that he didn't really care for that. But anyway, that's a digression. What's interesting is that Marty posted a lot of really interesting material about Pinter, and it's well worth looking at. I mean, he was a very interesting person. I think he was a great artist. I mean, I think he really was a real original. You may not like his plays, but they definitely were original. And he's and a film like The Servant and Accident, which he wrote the script for that. Joseph Losey directed that as well, which is also very well worth seeing. We may screen that on the Gaggle as well in the near future. But anyway, Marty, thank you so much. And NKMRD, good evening. Thank you for your generosity. So thank you all. Well, thank you for today. I think my time is up. I really appreciate everyone who had joined me. It's been a thoroughly miserable day. I mean, you go to the dentist, it's like you're spending, see, two weeks in 1 hour. So that was no fun. But anyway, this was fun. Everybody who had I just saw Peros says, I remember Pinter praised John Pilger during his career and criticized the USA in his Nobel Prize speech. Yeah, no, the Nobel Prize speech was superb. As I say, he was already not in the best of health by then, but it was a great speech, and I'm glad that he got it. I mean, it was like, there's some really head scratchers or people who get the Nobel Prize for Literature. You think, well, who is this person? Why? Well, I've never heard of him. And, he gets the Nobel Prize for Literature. So it's satisfying when somebody who I think really deserves it gets the Nobel Prize for Literature, and he really did deserve it. So. Anyway, watch the film. Watch The Servant. It's a very dark film. It's a very disturbing film, but it's certainly a very provocative film. So it's there. It's on the Gaggle locals page, and it should be an incentive to everyone to join the Gaggle, subscribe to the Gaggle, to support this community of ideas and culture, politics, and everything else that we're all about. So thank you. Anyway, we'll be back on Thursday, the same time, which is whatever it is, 4 p.m. at the moment, East Coast time. So see you then. Until then, good night. All the best. Bye-bye.